and our uh, uh, we had a student presentation that would always start the morning, and there were a few of them, but they only had a very brief time period to present, and um, they had to do it on time, and the student was running out of time, and I would give them a 5-minute mark from the back of the room, and I'd walk up to the side, and then as their time was running out, I'd get closer and closer to them, and as their time was out, I would take the mic off of them and switch the next person on. Well, as I got closer, he put another slide on the overlay, so he wasn't going to stop. And I stepped right next to him, and I literally chased him around the podium. And the audience thought it was funny as can be. But when it came to the award ceremony later on, we chased him around the podium again. It turned out this is Euthymus Angelicus. He's now a main editor for a major neuroscience publication in Europe. He was a Greek student at Lubar's lab at the time. So we always had fun. But after that, the students would look at a stopwatch and time their presentation, to be done on time.
You had operant or classical conditioning, and I thought this was last week.
Well, it's
who was conditioning who?
It's conditioning them, but we did it to Barry Sturman too. Barry, the EEG for the new millennium in 2000. We had the aquarium for our party in Monterey, but during the meeting, he had a full hour. We gave him an hour because he's a major presenter. Time came to 10 minutes. I gave him a 10-minute sign from the back of the room. He shook his head no, and so I was doing my normal thing. I walk up next to the side, and as I was getting closer to him, it was obvious he wasn't going to stop. He did another acetate overlay. He was just barely past the cat story. He wasn't really into anything new. And I looked over to the side, and then Nolan White and Big Joe Horvat were on the front row, and I just motioned to him. They both came up, one on either side of him, picked Barry up by the arms. His feet were in the air kicking, and he said, "Let me get my slides." I grabbed his stuff, and the next person was already on. So he finished on time as scheduled. But we gave him a special presentation in another room to finish his talk because he wasn't anywhere close to being done. So anybody who wanted to catch the last part of it could get another shot at finishing it. But that was the most popular video we had. It was him being carried off stage. So.
I understand. It's funny though with timing. It's what was it? 2 years ago now? I think it was 2 years ago. There were around 6 of us in the same conundrum. We all thought that we had been awarded an hour each for our presentations. And then we got there and we literally had 15 minutes each. It was one of the scientific programs. And it was obviously massive communication because all 6 of us, different presentations, had prepared for an hour. That was something. That was something, just trying to go on the spot.
Well, I've always said I would walk out of a talk I wasn't enjoying, even if it was mine. And I was on a panel discussion. There were 3 of us, and we talked at front 15 minutes each, and then 15 minutes for questions. It makes good sense. Yeah. And the first person went like 20 minutes easily, and the second person was running long, and I realized he was going to go over as well. I grabbed my material and I said, "Obviously, you need more time. You can have mine." I got up and I left. I walked out of my own talk. I didn't do a talk. I got up and left. So I wasn't having fun. No.
Dr. Hill, man,
I'm a devout hedonist. So,
Dr. Hill, what's the update, man? You all right? You still got the same place?
Still got the same place. We're still here in California. Yeah. What happened to all the other Southern California? I haven't seen John Meekrit for a while. I wonder if those guys are okay.
I don't think the election did them too well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Chad, I
So,
love
no.
you, baby. Joy, I love you, baby. Come on. We'd love to have you back.
That's right. Come on, Joy. Come on, John.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy. No, we're glad you're okay. All of our LA peeps, all of our California peeps. Hasn't got
Yeah,
to
it
the
rained over the weekend. It rained just enough to put some water on the ground without making massive flows of chemical sludge everywhere. So that's nice.
Good. Yeah. Oof.
Just enough rain.
Mm-hmm.
So what's hot? What's not?
It's a Tuesday. I'm hanging out with some neuro geeks, neuronoodling. It's what we do.
Wait, hold on. Did I just fly around the world?
What's
Backwards once? Is it Tuesday or Wednesday?
Wednesday. Sorry,
Well,
Wednesday.
I thought it was
lose track.
Wednesday. Yeah.
I have clients in India. I have clients in Australia. I have clients in Hong Kong, on the East Coast US, on the East Coast of Canada, and I never know when it is in my own time zone because I'm always thinking about, I'm talking to somebody, it's that time there, and I lose track of what day it is completely.
I hear you. I think if I were ever, knock on wood, in some kind of an accident, and to orientate me, they ask me what day it is, I'll fail. I'll totally fail. My weekend now is Monday, Tuesday, because I work Saturday, Sunday. It's like, I don't know what day it is.
What kind of people are coming to the office, or in your case, 20%, Dr. Hill?
Yeah, well, the new year, right? We have this gym, new year, new brain kind of focus where everyone decides that they're going to do some stuff. I haven't seen as much of it this year, the kind of New Year's resolution push, but there is some of that. And there's a certain amount of people hitting back to college and back to secondary school that are getting their first wake up call in new classes, new teachers, new progress reports. And so we're starting to get some of the kid wave that comes a few weeks after the school year starts. But I find I get a New Year's wave in February sometime. People put off, the transformation, put off looking at their brain, put off their dentist appointments, put off their oil changes. And then they're like, it's already February. Oh, crap. I better get on some stuff. So
that's going to be happening next week.
Next week. Exactly. I'm hoping for a big rush. Come on in. We'll support you guys.
On the remote stuff, anything different?
Not really. We're expanding that. We now have a remote services out of Florida, and we're also onboarding a partner in Nova Scotia. And so we sort of have the entire East Coast locked up from New York City, Nova Scotia, New York City, all the way down to Florida now. But just because of we have so many of our clients run remote, I tend to run about 100 or more remote clients at any one point right now. And it's just a lot of customer support. I mean, the hardest part of a remote program is not the neurofeedback. We're doing, arousal model, regulatory model, phenotype training off of QEEGs. That is a somewhat straightforward process if you know the brain, and if you've done 1,000, done neurofeedback with 1,000 people or something, you kind of get the hang of doing that style neurofeedback. It's a practical approach. Hard part of remote neurofeedback is having to have staff on 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, have clients in different time zones, language barriers. Most of my clients, I speak their languages, but there's occasionally a few that I don't speak their languages, and that makes it hard to do neurofeedback. How do you ask somebody about how they're feeling, or nuance things, or explain things about how a brain works or a resource works when there's a language barrier? So in languages that are in a couple languages I speak, I have to do some work in, but I've mostly lucked out in my other big center outside of the UK and the US is Sweden. And Swedes all speak English for the most part, and I speak Swedish. So there's no issue there generally with communication. But then I have a few clients in Hong Kong who only speak Cantonese, and I'm working through their daughter or their aunt or something. And we had in the US, I have a few clients in LA, and I don't speak Spanish. I should learn Spanish, but don't speak Spanish. I have a few clients where I work through their daughter or their friend because of the language barrier being significant. But it's still easier to do neurofeedback than it would be to do therapy in that context, because I'm asking about regulatory shifts in people's experience and stress, sleep, attention, mood, whatever. These are fluctuating resources day to day, or experiences day to day. So, the language barrier is not too hard to cross. Ja, Radar. Ja, jag pratar svenska. Lite svensk. Inte så bra. Inte så good.
More meatballs?
Yeah, svenska kortfars. That's meatballs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that your go-to?
No, I'm not a huge fan of Swedish meatballs, actually.
I have some of the same time zone difficulties with international clients, and some of the groups I do have people from all over, some from Europe and from Australia in the same group. So it's odd times and odd days. But the good thing is when you're reviewing EEGs live with a group, occasionally you get a pre and a post, and be able to actually show, this is what we saw, this is what you trained, here's the results. And the electrophysiologic results are fabulous in some of these cases, and quite dramatic, and actually show locally the areas that were being trained are the areas that had maximum change. But the person changing is, I think, the story that goes along with all the data and ends up giving it the kind of the emotion. And
I do 10 of those sometimes a day. Today's what, Wednesday? I've lost track already.
Tuesday's
my big day.
Wednesday, yes.
Yeah, Tuesdays I do 10 or 12.
We determined that 10 minutes ago. So
I know. And Wednesday I usually do about 9 or 10 direct consults, going over often change maps with experiences, saying here's a feature that looks changed, often it means this, what is your experience, and validating that and getting those stories. And we were talking about, I think, AI a couple weeks ago. I now have, I think, pushing 10,000 videos of me discussing people's brains with them over live data for 30 to 40 minutes, validating hypotheses, testing ideas, talking about experience, teaching them their neuroscience. So that's going to be a really good training data set at some point. If people want to let me use their data, I'll have to ask them. But I've learned a lot. That's how I got good at doing it, was by doing that exact thing, that correlative review.
Today I looked at a 75-year-old that I saw about 4 months ago for the pre, and the post. He has a perfect 10 hertz alpha at the back of the head, beautiful, the topographies, everything. He's sleeping like a baby, he's dreaming, and he's remembering his dreams.
Nice.
And what's striking about that, I mean, you tell people you're dreaming and you can remember your dreams. Some people say, well, so what, I dreamed too, but he can't remember ever in his past dreaming or remembering his dreams. And he's a very famous sports figure, and he's set up a foundation because of the dramatic impact on his life. He set up a foundation to fund neurofeedback for traumatic brain injury for other people in football, but they can pay, but also people who don't have money that don't have to pay because the foundation will cover it. Anyway,
he's to a couple of folks in the MLB who are in the umpire association about trying to find ways to get neurofeedback supported for the umpires, because they all have major head injury experiences from being umpires. Like, they all get balls to the face, unprotected, unflinching, no response, balls to the face, or bats to the face, or and so a lot of them have TBI kind of history, worse than the baseball players.
Yeah.
Speaking of baseball, doctor, here's a softball for you. How far away can you help people? I've talked with people in Switzerland and Qatar, who have
Qatar.
Qatar.
It's either Qatar or Qatar. I don't know which is the worst American pronunciation of it.
I've got clients in the Mideast who have opened a clinic, and we're the first ones to be allowed by their government, which apparently gives some like a state licensing board sort of a thing, only for the country. He's the first person who's not a neurologist to be able to get an EEG credential. And he's the first and only neurofeedback person. He's a psychologist,
Mhm.
but he's done really quite well. He gets people from all over the Mideast coming to him, and then all of his EEGs come through me. So,
Great.
and he's been doing it for a number of years now. So
EEG is
he's
pretty big in the Middle East. I have a lot of clients in Dubai
Mhm.
currently, and I work with both. A lot of the Dubai community of clients I work with go back and forth between London and Dubai, and we end up with getting brain maps when they're in London. We also, I know at least 2 different neurofeedback and QEEG centers in Dubai that send me data.
Yeah.
And gosh, in Switzerland, I mean, I work with clients in Switzerland, but if you're in Switzerland and you're anywhere near Chur, you should see Andy Mueller, Andreas Mueller, Dr. Mueller, who worked with Yuri Kropotov in helping develop some of the HBI med stuff, I believe, unless I'm misremembering. And it has a much larger set of analysis they've worked on that's beautiful in distinguishing ADHD states. But I work with clients all over the world, Radar. So, if you're in a country that I have an office in, we rent you gear. And if you're not in a country I have an office in, you travel to one or you buy gear. And then we work with you. So, anywhere you like.
That was easy.
It's hard to get far enough away to not have access. I mean,
Yeah, and you don't need live internet to actually train, although we do live support, so that helps. But you just need, some internet here and there. And I use battery-powered little QEEG amplifiers now that are tiny. So it doesn't really, the hardest part, I was griping about this on the Neurofeedback Discord channel yesterday. The hardest part is the 50 hertz noise in Europe. I really hate EEG in Europe because of the 50 hertz noise in all of the buildings. In Sweden and in the UK and other parts of Europe, it's just so bad that the buildings are built differently. And I mean, 50 hertz, I think the reason is 50 hertz won't kill you and 60 hertz will. You grab a live wire in the US of DC 60 hertz and it will stop your heart. But 50 hertz won't do that. It doesn't interfere with physiology the same way for some reason.
Yeah.
So I think that's why there's just ambient 50 hertz noise flooding Europe, because no one cares, because there isn't really
a lot of the
lethal.
European buildings weren't built with grounded circuits all over. And like in the US, if you have an ungrounded circuit, and you get a 60 hertz in that area because of the circuit not having a ground. So, but 50 and 60 hertz have notch filters that handle them fairly well. But a notch filter is only good up to about 100 decibels, and sometimes you get more than that of the noise, which means you've got too close to a source is all.
What about any impact of even with a notch filter? There must be a frequency roll off for where it is sensitive and where it's not. Like, if you're getting 50 hertz bleeding across all frequencies, which happens with high amplitude, are you able to notch filter it out and affect frequencies that are lower?
Yeah.
In fact, a notch filter from 45 to 55 that drops at 120 decibels will take care of it if it's a reasonable amount. If it's too much, nothing can handle it. If it's you're too close to a transformer.
This is something kind of interesting too. I'll hold it up. I'll cover the name, and here we go.
The name's been changed to protect the.
Well, no, it's just this is currently on my desk. They're doing renovations upstairs.
Oh, and you're catching
but it's really interesting in terms of where we get the interference and where we completely don't. Okay, so I'm with the landlord. Okay, like literally, what are they doing on the 7th floor that's causing this? And we're on the 2nd floor, right? And it actually it sounds like running water down here. I know it's not, but it's fascinating in terms of where this happens. And we've talked about this before in terms of how the interference is almost always stronger on F4. And again, look at that. It's stronger on F4
compared to what?
than it is on F3.
Compared to F3?
Yeah.
Perhaps impedance difference. Who knows?
It's universal, Jay. It's a mystery that before I'm never retiring, but you know how it is. I do trust that, some way, sometime we'll figure out why whenever.
If you can figure out how to retire, you let me know, because I'm really not good at it at all.
No, I mean, I'm not planning to. I plan to do less of what I'm doing and integrate more fun things. Well, this is fun too. That's the problem. This is too much fun.
Since we have so many shy people, then they're relying on me to ask the questions. So I'm going to throw one out there. Dr. Hill, I'm holding a little device that's hard for you to see, a little Raspberry Pi here. With Raspberry Pis out there, of course I mispronounced it, and this new thing with DeepSeek, the thing that's challenging NVIDIA, DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Do you see, with things getting smaller, the Raspberry Pi, long story short, it's about $100 computer that has most of the innards with it. And with DeepSeek, which is going to be a better AI, ChatGPT, can Neurofeedback build their own AI, run their own chat, for lack of a better.
Let's back up.
Yeah.
What problem are we trying to solve with that AI? Yes, there's lots of things you can do with machine learning or AI, but which particular problem are you trying to frame?
I think the first one is a simple chatbot where you're going through symptoms intake and all that to get you along in a process.
There's a couple people already on the Discord, Neurofeedback Discord, who've built custom GPTs loaded in with 20, 30, 40 libraries. Lisa Tattarin's done the same thing with her data sets and her way of processing in MATLAB. And they're getting decent analysis out of their data sets. I think it's possible. I'm not sure that I would I'm not sure I trust the ability of the systems to do analysis yet. So my solution, I'm pretty close to finishing. I built a tool to, I do these videos, these 45, sometimes 30 to 45 minute videos describing, orienting someone to what a QEEG is, what a CPT is, walking through it every single time, being very, very systematic. And what I've done is set up a tool so I can take those videos, ingest them, break down the likely phenotypes, the likely goals, and then pull from my list of starting place protocols that might match the particular things we found and create a formatted sort of summary, but off of the analysis that I've done and describe to them, not doing the analysis. So I'm putting the AI in the teaching role, essentially. After I've taught, it goes and summarizes and creates another pedagogical, if you will, kind of instrument. I find it's really useful for that kind of thing. Munging, reformatting, reframing, expanding stuff. And I trust it to do that. I can also read that and make sure it's valid. I don't trust it to throw in waveforms and have it tell me, hey, there's some transients on this site. It won't save me any time. I'll still have to spend all of the time looking at the EEG.
John Hopkins just today posted news that they've got an algorithm to spot spikes. 70% of the time the doctors miss, and they can spot them in the EEG. And I'm just saying, well, that's because half the doctors were in the bottom half of their class, and the ones that are neurologists got 6 months of training. Yeah. So the 70% that they missed are
today or yesterday?
The data it was in the data, but they couldn't see it because of the lack of training.
Or because it wasn't ictal events. There was maybe it's a different group, but I saw a paper yesterday or today talking about how there was an algorithmic approach to spike detection, but it wasn't looking for spikes. It was looking for transient batches of tissue that were suppressing spikes that weren't visible like as SMR. A spike, but as like a little raft of data that was suddenly getting frozen briefly and then letting go again. And that was essentially its equivalent to a spike, apparently. Is that this group or different paper?
It's the same group.
Interesting.
But I mean, you need to look at the percentages. That again, 70% higher detection rate than the doctors looking at it with their eyes.
Well, I mean, I'm going to put a little politics in here, though. It kind of irks me that we put money into, training a machine, but we don't put the money into training a person, And I think, where we are technologically.
What Jay is saying is we can't train the person.
Into both, right? Because we still need. I don't know. I'm all for the humanistic, person to person approach balanced with the AI. Yeah, again, it bothers me that we just jump over the not putting time into training people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I refer to it as PI, plagiarized intelligence.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's not really artificial intelligence. They just plagiarize a bunch of data and
Yeah.
put it out as though it was intelligent.
Wait, what
Uh,
happened to co-opetition, Jay?
No,
well,
this is different. I'm with Jay.
you know,
I mean,
uh,
I talk
Le-
about
Le-
art.
Lisa Tatran just heard my talk on far field phase reversals, and she had her algorithm spit out, as they spit out long treatises about stuff, one paragraph at a time, all it could come up with about far field phase reversals. And she asked me what I thought of it. And going through it, it had texts that talked about true sources. In EEG, there's no ground truth. What are you talking about? A true source in EEG?
Yeah, scientific
um,
analysis is full of
so
hallucinations still.
I would have
in
given
AI.
the paper that it spit out a C- in as a student. Basically, it should have done better. But it wasn't bad. It was a C-. I mean, it wasn't,
Well,
if
you're
you would have,
talking about the bottom half of the class again. If you're
Yeah.
working on my brain, I don't want anybody with a C-. That means you've absorbed.
Yeah.
Oh, you have
The thing
not.
is, all of the all of those complaints are looking at a snapshot in time, and this stuff is not that.
Yeah.
This stuff is accelerating exponentially. And Pete pointed out that the Raspberry Pi, Jeff Geerling demoed installing DeepSeek on the Raspberry Pi on YouTube recently. It's kind of slow, and he's using a reduced model to get it to run, but it runs. And this stuff's going to keep changing. So, whenever we start talking about the problems with AI, you might as well be talking about, oh my God, cell phones are so disruptive. Movies, the talkies, those talkies.
Now,
Come
Andrew,
on.
we're going to get into a little bit of battle here. My issue is that it's going too fast, and we're not acknowledging the errors, and it's being put out before it's ready, and it can cause harm. I mean, I'm not against it.
Well, it's not done. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This is not a piece of technology like other technology you've ever experienced. It moves so fast.
Yeah.
That it's going to be.
It's also falsely accelerated. That's my issue. Yes, it's moving fast, but if you have an unfinished product that's moving fast, I think it can compound the potential for help as well as compound the potential for harm. So caution here. We can get a bit overexcited.
Well, caution's gone because the models are now open. The models are open source.
Yep.
DeepSeek R1 is performing almost as well as the Pro model, the $200 a month model from OpenAI.
Yeah.
And it's free and open source. So a beefy computer and a bit of time, and you can be running something as good as the best AI, essentially. That has implications that are quite broad for changing industries, education, technology. I mean, I think we're heading to a place in a couple of years that software is no longer going to be an industry. Just ask your piece of tech to become something briefly. Turn to neurofeedback software right now, please, for me. It does that. Hey, planning. Hey, recipes, and it reconfigures itself. So that's probably where we're going. Yeah. So that's hey, VJ, you got a couple folks showing up. Sorry, we're ranting about AI.
Well, VJ's late. They're relying on my questions. Everybody's so shy. So here we go. Spiritual stuff from VJ.
We've been working on enlightenment, huh? Yeah. So our job is to get VJ to develop his. How would you describe what we're doing, VJ?
Ghostbusters?
Something. So I've talked to VJ a little bit about this question. He was asking me about what I see when we do psychics or spiritualists or people in ecstatic states. Because at this point, I've done a bunch. I did kind of humorously, Tyler Henry, Dr. Drew and I did a play-by-play on Tyler Henry's brain when he was doing his Hollywood show. And I've done a few other psychics, and I had a couple others recently. A pet psychic was able to voluntarily change her brain in the same 2 ways with 2 different techniques she does for her psychic practice. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. She changed it. And 2 months later came back, did another set of recordings and did the exact same thing. So I've seen these kind of phenomena in these people with atypical, if you will, spiritual experiences. And I guess that's what maybe VJ is wondering is what have other folks seen? Because you guys are
quite a bit of the spiritual stuff is going to need something beyond your standard medical grade amp. DC to 70 hertz doesn't really catch the gamma that is the gamma that they look for if they really are researching gamma. Gamma 2 between 80 and 100 hertz, which is outside the DC to 70 range. You need to go up to 150 hertz and get gamma 2 and
But that's,
ripples
you're
in order
talking
to
about mostly
start to
trait
look at
level
it.
stuff, not state stuff, right? This is Cliff Saren's work around gamma. This is traits. This is acquired traits through long-term meditation. That's not necessarily the same thing as ecstatic experiences, which are absorptive and dissociative. So I would argue that gamma is probably not part of the ecstatic state as much as it is.
It's part of consciousness.
Yeah, but the ecstatic
So
state is something
that,
specific.
as such, it'll be part of, if you're conscious during something, it'll be there. It's a major piece of anything that's got consciousness in it. If you're conscious, you have a active relationship between your slow cortical potentials and your gamma. And if they're related, you've got consciousness. If they're not related, you're not conscious. You're deep enough to have surgery sometimes, or you're in a state that's not effable.
And for folks that are wondering, related means time locked or phase locked, basically.
Yeah, one of my questions too, as well. I mean, gosh, we were, kind of curious and doing some of the stuff. Well, 20, 25 years ago, people would say, hey, record my brain because I can do this. Now, one of the things we did see is the recordings were different, but there wasn't necessarily any correlation between the differences in the brain waves and what they thought they were doing. So
And
yes,
I
they
would
were
say
in
the same
different
thing for the
states.
first 20 years that I did this. But in the
Yeah.
past 5 years, there's been a handful of people, and I've been seeing the same phenomena show up again and again. And
Nice.
Tyler Henry was the first one, and I'm like, wow. I mean, Drew and I talked about it on air. We're like, he looks like he's dissociating when he's gesticulating, moving his hands, and sweating, and he has these massive swells of delta showing up at the same time, like he was checking out. And I thought that's interesting, and I've seen that since, that same phenomenon where there's either focal, well, it's usually focal delta, big bursts of focal delta blob right out, as if they're shutting off parts of their brain, and I would normally expect somebody to be in a dissociative
or
state.
turning on. The big delta isn't necessarily off. Years ago, John DeLuca took Salvia divinorum at a ISNR meeting. It was a group of people that met in a room. They brought me in to watch the EEG be recorded to see if it's really EEG. And he was putting out 1,000 microvolts of 10-second long waves. And it was well, 10-second long waves is kind of sub-delta. That's infra slow. And the amount of gamma and the amount of infra slow content was massive. So massive that you would think of it as some sort of an artifact if it hadn't been observed really. So, you can get gigantic perspiration artifact. You can get all sorts of other gigantic slow waves, but this was not. Perspiration has random phase initiated at a point in time by the sympathetic trigger, but after that, each sweat gland is independent as to when it absorbs and re-emits. And so you get large slow sways, but there's no sync to them. There's no pattern to them. And this was all patterned. And it was the altered state section of ISNR, ASS. And
I haven't heard of that. I must have missed that meeting, and I'm not sure it was 3
years after we did the event, we actually presented the data as a workshop at the sometime if you want to watch it, I've got John DeLuca's PowerPoint, which is a rather interesting journey in and of itself.
My guess is that video is on the archive, the ISNR. So for those of you who are not ISNR members, if you sign up, you can, I think, log in.
I seriously doubt that it's in ISNR's possession.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it made it out of that video didn't
room.
make it out of the workshop to get into their archives.
Okay. Interesting.
All right, we're keeping on Ghostbusters here. Have you guys ever seen anything spooky like in an EEG of two people's EEG synchronizing?
I want to take this out of spook. There's some really interesting things. Like we do know, for example, that you can start to, obviously you can regulate and match respiration. You can start to regulate heartbeat. And to a certain extent in some of the couples work we were doing, and I know Castle has started to take this up, but we were doing this years and years ago where you would hook two people up with one feedback system, even though the two signals were different. And it was just in terms of frequently down training the arousal in a couple going through great difficulty. And I mean, it's not like overt synchronization, but you definitely see one person slow down or one person speed up to match. There's nothing spooky about that. It's just really good EEG based couples counseling, right?
So
now, anybody want to take it into spook?
we did a publication published in Society for Scientific Exploration's journal, and we were looking at a healer and a healee coupled. And the healer healee were at a distance; they weren't like touching, but the healer was putting out standing waves that phase synchronized the healee to his EEG. Now, creating a standing potential requires gigantic harmonics, and he hit the Schumann resonances, which is plural. It's not one frequency. It's 7.83 and lots of harmonics. The fourth harmonic is in gamma, but the healee is not volitionally trying to sync. This is if you're a swimmer and you're in a wave table, and you're a swimmer or you're a little cork in a tiny wave table, and somebody was creating a standing potential in the pool, it would look like there were waves, but they weren't moving. And if you're a cork, you would float to the bottom of a wavelet. So you phase and train with standing potentials. And the healee was phase synchronized within less than a second as soon as the healer was putting out this specific frequency and all of its harmonics. And the analysis was done by Luke Hendricks in Minneapolis. He doesn't really know much about EEG. And he said, well, now we got it collected. You can analyze it. I said, no, you're going to analyze it. And he said, well, I don't know anything about it. I said, well, just turn on the bispectrum, the display, and scan through 4-second epochs. Just scan through the EEG and tell me if you see it. Well, what am I looking for? Well, if it's there, you'll see it. And the next day he shows me one pattern, which is basically just the healer's background alpha rhythm at about 11. It's just the bispectrum is a simple one line up at 11, one line across, and they intersect at 11. So it's a simple pattern. And then he showed me one that looked like a checkered tablecloth of cross-spectral coupling. And he said, is this it? And I said, I told you couldn't miss it if it happened. It's harmonics. And the bispectrum shows the harmonics. You need to know what you're looking at. You just see, oh, lots of harmonics. And at that point, the harmonics were present and the phase shifting happened. We were invited to analyze a healer event where a person was going to be healed, and the healer, and there were apparently 10,000 people across the world that at a certain time were going to have the image of lightning striking this guy. And Schumann resonances are created by lightning, by the way. But they had a 5-minute baseline and 2 5-minute periods, and I simply looked which one of the 5-minute periods is full of harmonics, and that was the one where they were doing the healing. Blinded rater, and they were all excited about the data. And I said, well, for God's sakes, don't show the data to anybody. This is a 50-50 chance. The next time you're going to do something like this, don't do this after the fact, showing it to me. Ask me ahead of time. I would have said, do a 5-minute baseline and then 9 periods of time, 2 of which were randomly picked, not ahead of time. but randomly picked as you're going. And if you pick 2 out of the 9 and still have it accurate, then you've got something. They did that. It was still obvious. So healer-healy relationships are easily identifiable as a big bunch of Schumann resonance happening, and that's the coupling between them. Now, it doesn't mean that's the healing. It's the connection.
Yeah.
You know, if I call Andrew on the phone and he picks up the phone, that's a connection. There's no conversation yet. You know, there's just a connection. There has to be something delivered for healing to happen, and it may be something really quite obvious, but we've seen the ability to identify the connection, and that's a step up from not being able to identify it blindly.
So gamma awareness consciousness seems to be implicated for controlling these disassociative or remaining upright during them. Seems accurate because Hindus talk about awareness during dreamless sleep, BJ says. Or states like astral projection.
Well, being consciously aware and controlling your dreams is, the lucid dreaming, which was a spin-off of Carl Pribram lecture at Stanford, and a lot of stuff spun off of Carl.
I think it's a spun off of a 12-pack. Radar Ashwood says, since bipolar inhibits train coherence, then why do we bipolar inhibits with the expectation that they will actually inhibit? Doesn't coherence increase power?
Well, if you're inhibiting the difference between 2 locations.
If you're talking about bipolar, you're talking about an amplifier, for God's sakes. Let's get this technical stuff straight here. Bipolar, talking about an electrode placement, is a misnomer. It's a common misnomer. It's so common, everybody thinks it's okay. But technically, your amp is a push-pull differential amplifier, which is bipolar. It has 2 inputs and a ground. You can use it sequentially with 2 known active sites, and you're looking at the difference between the sites. Or you can have one spot that you assume is a neutral reference point. It never will be. You pick a spot to be a neutral reference.
Yeah, the ears are active,
luck.
Unfortunately, radar. So even an A1 or A2 is an active.
In fact, ear references are awful. They're terrible references. They pick up stuff off the temporal lobe and manifest it as though it's coming from everywhere. You need to switch more than one montage just to know what you're looking at. The standards for interpreting EEG, more than one montage. You can look straight at somebody. You don't know, turn sideways. Do they have a big nose? They have a flat face? I mean, until you see 3D, you don't really know what you're looking at. So in EEG, you need more than one perspective, and the montage is your perspective. If you pay attention to Nunez, who's not trying to sell you anything, he will tell you that Laplacian montages are the best way to see the coherence. That goes against the saying of other big names in the field who are trying to sell you machines. So, think twice about who you're believing. The salesperson or the person who writes books about EEG. Nunez is awfully sharp. He talked about Laplacian montages being the better way to look at it in 1997. And I talked about that in 1998 at a meeting, False Frontal Alpha, using linked ears. I didn't know about his paper. I mean, there's so many journals out there, you don't get them all, But
I still use Laplacian, and everyone, who's an old school, newer EEG people like, oh, using Laplacian, that's so old. I'm like, no. Here's like 4 reasons you want to use Laplacian, because it has benefits. It has a couple of drawbacks, but it has some significant benefits. The biggest one is it's a little bit insensitive to gross distortions that are global. So medication, fatigue, wash that out, and a little spatial precision and a dropout.
I hear people say that Laplacian montage gets rid of medication effect all the time.
No, it doesn't get rid of it, but it does reduce it.
I want to see one EEG where medication effect is eliminated by Laplacian, or even
not
minimized.
Eliminated, but it is reduced. Like you'll see someone's theta in an ADHD state when they're medicated. You'll see it in Laplacian more then you will in linked ears.
I can pop up a benzodiazepine intoxication case and switch montages around. You're going to see it no matter what montage you're in. If you want to see it accurately as to where it's coming from, you should use a Laplacian technique, which shows local function better than any of the others. But the term bipolar is commonly referred to as two active sites, and it does look at the difference between the sites, but it's quite often capable of training differential. The sequential placement can end up training SMR stuff at C4 and fast alpha stuff at PZ. And you're not going to synchronize C4 and PZ. So you're really training two sites to create any kind of SMR content that you
I have a question about that particular protocol. So on Monday nights, I do this live stream, Neurofeedback and Chill, where I set up myself and do a session and describe it and talk about the technique behind it. And then I go into some other biohacking topic or answer questions. And a couple nights ago, I did C4 minus PZ, and I do that protocol for me at 11.5 to 14.5 hertz. And I generally notice, I'm fairly sensitive to training. I notice it, I feel it when I do neurofeedback. And in this case, I felt a little bit of, the classic stuff, a little bit of focus, a little bit of activation, a little bit of calmness. But as I was talking, because I'm answering lots of questions, I noticed that my voice got tight. And I didn't think too much of it in the half an hour, but it kept getting tight. And I developed a little bit of vocal stridor in response to that protocol, and then it wore off. But I was a little bit surprised that I had like literally a throat tightening kind of response to training C4 minus PZ. So I assume I did get some beta being brought up at PZ through the C4 minus PZ montage. Does that sound plausible?
It depends upon what you were suppressing and what you were training as to what kind of an effect you got.
4 to 7, 11.5.
C4 PZ generally has a tendency to speed up alpha at PZ, C4 PZ. And fast alpha, faster than you're used to having, feels a little higher function. It's not quite like training beta in the same location, but it's sort of. It's a
very noticeable like voice effect though. Like I started sounding like RFK Jr. for a second.
It might not be the protocol that you needed,
Clearly, but I've done that before a lot actually. So I was a little surprised by that particular effect. But,
since nobody's asking questions, then it's everybody there. It's the chat room's fault for letting me come in.
Here's a question. Radar's got one.
There we go. Dang it. Oh, by the way, I watched the Jay Gunkelman documentary. I was amazed by how much high praise Jay got. Popular guy. Well earned, I might say.
Well, you can't believe everything you see,
You have to be popular to get a bobblehead made out of you, right?
Lots of bobbleheads.
It was humbling to have the documentary done. And the first time I saw it, I didn't know, well, the editors can make you look like the hero or the fool. And I've been the fool a lot, so I kind of halfway expected that was going to be a fair amount of it, but they put a pretty good polish on it, it looked like. So a lot less of the fool, apparently.
Good.
Well, quick technology question. This can go to Jay and Dr. Hill. Jay, you were making and selling amplifiers when they were the size of an armoire.
A mid-century armoire, no less.
So you know a little bit about the engineering, and Dr. Hill, you know a little bit about the Pi. As I'm fiddling with this thing, it reminds me back in the old days of the old electronics 101 set, where you can take something and plug it together. The AI camera that you can plug into this thing, so you can get facial recognition, you can see object recognition. So you have the camera, looking at the face.
Oh, then you can do HRV biofeedback with it because you can do red level filtering.
That's where
you don't need any contact. You can do camera-based red level filtering and get heartbeat off of someone's face. And therefore you can do HRV with a breath tracer and a visual processing, you could actually build an HRV kit within a Raspberry Pi really easily. Yeah. HRV doesn't require any processing either. It's super trivial for processing. Yeah.
So you have that, and I'm going back to Jay. All an amplifier is taking something really small and making it really big, right?
Well, simplification.
Ideally, sort of a simplistic way. That's how you would explain it. But
I'm kind of a simplistic guy, yeah.
And filtering.
An amplifier is going to have high pass, low pass, notch filters. I mean, there's all sorts of other things that you end up having in a good amplifier. Boxcar filter. How many people even have heard of a boxcar filter? You know, but
it's amplifying, but it's filtering out all the crap, right? That's the big thing that you want out of it.
Supposed to. Supposed to.
It sets up a window of frequencies for you to see, but it keeps other frequencies out of your view. And there's times that you want to see those frequencies. The reason that people want to go all the way down to DC is that there are slow cortical potentials that turn on and off networks. And if you filter out from 1 hertz on down, you don't see any of that. You can blind yourself to real content. The reason to go up above 70, we mentioned today, if you're interested in consciousness, for God's sakes, go up to 150 at least in order to get gamma 2.
Yeah, Cliff Saren's Samatha project was showing 200, 300, 400. He pulled out some data above 1,000 and showed us. So like there's stripes of gamma, just like I don't know how high it goes, but it's definitely up to at least 1,000 hertz.
We got 50 kilohertz out of people before, so but not all of it is neural.
Basically, a radio transmitter at that point.
Some of it is probably chemical. Neurotransmitters structurally morph, so they place like charged particles towards each other, and they try to avoid each other. So they have an oscillation because of the structure. And dopamine, you can end up having very high frequencies generated by dopamine. Just the structure of it, creating it.
Oscillations.
Anyway, we've got usually those kinds of frequencies are not of interest to the medical community, so they want DC to 70, and that's the window they're used to looking through. But again, if you're interested in consciousness, you should look outside of the traditional medical window at some higher frequencies. And I suggest going to 150 at least, because gamma and ripples can be seen. Gamma 2 and ripples can be seen. If you've got an amp that can go up to 800, like the old Nexus, you can actually, with Nyquist principle, see up to like maybe close to 400 hertz. But Nyquist principle is you have to have something sampling twice as fast as the signal you're interested in seeing, is only for detection of the signal. It's not for actually being able to draw the waveform of the signal. You'll get a high and a low, and you can see that there's something there, but what's the shape of the wave, you don't really know. So the Nyquist principle is okay for detection, but you have to have a 5 times oversampling if you want to start to draw some kind of a curve with some dots.
Which means you can't do neurofeedback on a waveform like that, because the 5 times oversampling smears the relationship between the wave leaving the head and the time and the processing, and then the time feedback. So for those of you who are geeky on signals, if you do more than third order sampling or filters, you end up breaking, you smear time relationships of signals leaving the head and the information coming back, and learning will go away. So you can't like set up your BioExplorer and put 5th and 6th and 8th order filters on. It'll work. It'll seem like it's working, but the beeps have very little relationship.
There ain't no feedback.
Yeah, the beeps are no longer related to the brain all that much in terms of the time locking.
The order of the FIR filter being so high gets you very, very, very accurate, but it gives you a tremendous latency.
Yeah.
And II are quick, but they're not accurate. And the fix for that is wavelets, which are fast and accurate. You need a whole bank of them, but that's easy to construct. So
the reason I was bringing it up, things are getting so small, and I wonder what the constraint is on the amplifier side of things to keep that small. Because what I'm looking at, my uneducated eye, is I am coding with something albeit this one is from the Chinese and it does work a little bit better. I'm sure they're going to give everything out, but a computer, my laptop, is now smaller than the size of a cigarette pack. If all this stuff is coming down, what is the constraint of getting an amplifier together and somebody manufacturing this themselves and using AI to work to measure the signals?
The problem is funding. It takes money to manufacture something. We made a pocket-sized brainwave analyzer in 1976. Nobody could believe you had a full amp that slipped into your pocket. But we didn't sell one of them, which is why I went to work in the EG lab that get me all the experience I had. Because the company I had, how do you make a small fortune in neurofeedback? You start with a large one. I spent more money trying to manufacture stuff and into this field than
see, you made it too small, Jay.
So
when it was the size of an armoire and had a color TV in it and a record player.
Yeah.
I'm just going way back nostalgia lane, literally hanging out in my father's lab in I don't know what year when it was all wall to wall, and I would literally assist with the plugging in and out and soldering, when I was like that tall. But I think it's this is just advancement, and we'll get as small as long as we can operationalize the components. You can go as small as you can go. So technology begets technology in terms of how nano we get.
The one that I use mostly.
Somebody asked me for the circuit diagram of what we had made so that they could make one, and I said, well, we were using op amps to build an instrumentation amp. You can get an instrumentation amp on a chip now, so. What we made with great difficulty, with two boards squeezed into something that would slip in your pocket, you can buy it on a chip. And that chip, if it's a good chip with a very high sampling rate and a multiplexer, you can have one chip of an amp chip that is multiplexed, similarly to what Brainmaster does with their amp. You have one chip and you multiplex through it. So lots of channels, sample and hold, and you reconstruct them. So that good instrumentation amp and a multiplexer, and you'd have lots and lots and lots of channels.
VJ just palmed me a $20 bill.
I would suggest if you get an amp that does multiplexing, you can't do remontaging without error being introduced. So you get an amp that's got a chip for every channel. So
to ensure prompt service, VJ asked the last question, and we'll split. Can we talk about infraslow? When is training more beneficial than other waves? Are there downstream effects on infraslow from training other waves?
What kind of training is more beneficial? Probably the one that your brain needs, and the only way you know which one your brain needs is to actually look. You need to have an evaluation that can point to what needs to be trained up or down, or the relationship between areas that needs to be changed, and that's going to guide your training. Your brain and a good analysis will guide you as to what to train. And as far as
do infraslow trainers even bother with a
they
assessment?
don't look at that. They're symptom based. They don't look at EEG, QEG, but that's changing slowly.
That's why I'm quiet on this. It's not my modality. I mean,
mine either. I'm familiar with it, but don't use it.
Yeah,
same.
My perspective, EJ, is a couple of use cases where it seems to work really well. Watching what Sue Othmer did, I think the profound autism over aroused nervous system is a good target. And I'm seeing a lot of trauma-informed therapists using it with good success. But I don't think it's I'm biased, as you know, but maybe all of us here are, but I don't think it's as nuanced a tool or as operatable a tool as
I think
controllable.
It's forced quieting. It's forced quieting.
I think they're still learning what they're doing. That where to train, what frequency tuning to get, and all of that is still being hammered out. There's some schools of thought that are more advanced than others, but as a signal, the infraslow content is critical for brain function. The thing is, Europe filtered out all the high frequencies and only looked at the slow cortical potentials. But in the US, we filtered out slow cortical potentials and only looked at the oscillatory EEG. You don't know brain function until you put those two together. That consciousness is the relationship between those two.
But to VJ's question, do you need to worry about training both of them, or since you're training a system, can you get away, or can you benefit from just doing perhaps one?
In fact, there isn't any systematic method to say which technique to pick over the other at this point. There's no gigantic Kentucky horse race that's been run with all of the techniques, with all
there's
of
not
the
even a
various
little bit of a horse race
presentations. That the combination permutation to assess that is just too complicated. And when they're studying neurofeedback, they usually require you to do a specific protocol for the group. Well,
which basically means you're no longer studying neurofeedback practice. You're studying a technique, but you're not studying the clinical practice of neurofeedback.
Exactly.
And that's been
and
my
I would
standard.
say none of this is about a technique per se. I mean, that's
what I would suggest is that it has to be personalized. And they say, well, that's how can you study that? Well, you set up ahead of time how you personalize it. Right. You have a set of rules,
individualized alpha frequency,
to sort people into.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it could be done, but good luck getting the funding for that. Mm-hmm. They quit funding neurofeedback really in the early 70s, and although they've tossed a few million at it lately with, again, one protocol fits all, theta beta, it's not how the field works. So it's not really a good test of anything.
Last question, and this goes out to all the Patreon people I've been calling up for support. Are there any consumer devices you would recommend for EEG measurement, or do they just not have the clinical-based accuracy? Are we recommending products here?
Well, it depends upon what you're going to use it for as to whether it's adequate for the task. If what you want to do is sit in front of a computer and float a little image of a ball up and down, most of them are adequate for that. If you want to do an ERP, the EEG amp doesn't have to be very good at all. The EEG is noise to ERP. So
it's reliability and validity to your purpose, right? I mean, all of us can jump up and down on that. And some of the interesting debates amongst practitioners is just what Jay was saying. Is it good enough for what we're trying to do? But I think all of us agree that without naming specific producers, but there's a lot that's just this flushed hogwash. And those ones are dangerous, right?
I'll name them if they support me.
Yeah, you can't get into the EEG space in a usable way for under $1,000 or $2,000 generally. There are devices out there.
People do it for $1,
Yeah, but there are devices out there.
Well, the problem is people who do it for thousands and thousands and don't know how to use it and don't know what it's doing.
Right. But you can get an open BCI ganglion board for $100 or something, and you have to learn a lot about EEG. You have to already be an expert to use it.
Exactly.
Or you can spend $1,000 or $2,000
BCIA, because people ask me all the time, what I want to come back with, hey, look, here's this manufacturer, they spent an hour with us, here's what they said, check it out, make your own decisions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're not going to have that in our field because it's all niche-y, fractured.
Well, I know my product's better than your product, but
no, not even that. There's just not enough people buying it, and so there's just no product maturity. There's 15,000 providers max, including the prosumers. There's probably only 30,000 installs of software and hardware in the whole world, actively being used. It's just a niche, and there's just no pressure, no development pressure, no financial pressure. The field is smaller now than it was last year or 2 years ago because of everyone aging out and dying who started the field.
That's what I discovered. If you're selling into a niche market, you can go broke. You sell one to everybody, your market's gone. So when you don't have another one to sell because everyone's got one, you don't really have a business anymore. But you can provide service to a niche market. And people require service again and again and again and again. So I quit trying to manufacture EEG stuff and allowed people to use whatever EEG stuff was out there. There were some that I wouldn't accept because they were just the amp wasn't safe to have hooked up to a person, and I didn't want to have any liability, so I wouldn't accept anything from some amps. But there's some standards for little wearable things that you can look at that kind of tell you whether the engineering is kind of better than others. If you see a solid metal disc for an electrode, probably not a good one. Solid metal has contact jitter, and if it's got a polymer coating, then it's not really a dry sensor, it's a damp sensor. There's some moisture held in that polymer, and that's a partial salt bridge. So if you see one that's got a coating on it, that's a step up from something that's a solid metal. And those are easy to spot just with the naked eye. Look at the amp, look at the electrode that the device has. If it looks shiny and metal, you probably don't have a better design. If you see one that's got a polymer coating, they've thought a couple of times about contact jitter and how to get around it.
Anything beats a needle.
I don't know. Maybe we should go back to needles.
Dr. Hill,
it's what we started with, but it's not what we wanted to stay with. That's for sure. So,
Dr. Hill, you got a good product. Where do we send people to see your remote or take a look at your remote?
Yeah, come check us out at peakbraininstitute.com, which is Peak Brain LA and all the socials, or come watch me on YouTube at Dr. Hill, DrHill, where I do weekly live streams demoing neurofeedback and talking about biohacking the brain.
And that's Mondays. We'll put the link right here.
I recommend it highly.
Little co-opetition. Dr. Marie Swingle, how do people check out iMinds?
Well, yeah, that you can kind of get anywhere. Check out in your local bookstore. Check it out online. Yeah.
And the Swingle app?
The app, Swingle Sonic, swinglesonic.com. Yeah. Good data on that.
And don't even try.
Jay's too busy.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Hollow, thanks for stopping by. I got your questions on TMS here. We're going to do a show in the morning, and I'll bring these up. Take care, all. And hey, Dr. Hill, glad you're still there, baby, and all of our friends in Cali.
Yeah.
That's right. We're still here. We're hanging in.
I look forward to the TMS questions. I was on the planning committee for the Clinical TMS Society for 5 years until my brain popped a leak and I couldn't get to their meetings anymore. So it's a little side interest of mine.
Well,
I'm glad you found the podcast.
I'm glad you found the cork. Everyone, have a great night. See you guys in the morning. You love my humor, Dr. Hill.
That's right.
Okay. By the way, just a heads up.